A very warm welcome to all of you who've taken the time to join us today. I hope you're all keeping well and, more importantly, taking measures to stay safe. I'm Stephanie Fernando and will be your facilitator for today's webcast. I'm extremely excited to have the opportunity to facilitate the webcast with our elite set of speakers we've lined up for this Global Payroll Week. We are going to give others a quick minute or two to join us, and probably while we wait for them, here's a quick introduction for today's webcast. So, as you might already know, today marks the start of the Global Payroll Week, which celebrates payroll professionals worldwide by encouraging recognition, for their diligent and important work that they actually do. During this week, we encourage payroll professionals to highlight their contributions to their organization and simply celebrate the complex job that they do each and every day, day in and day out, with so much of pride. Especially now, given that the global crisis that we find ourselves in, where there is a definite need to ensure employees have their paychecks deposited. So, payroll professionals out there, if some of you have joined us today, to me, and I think to several others out there, you definitely are a superhero, and thank you. So at Niamo, we've kind of done our bit to put together this webcast series that'll throw light on the steps that global organizations are taking to ensure continuity in their payroll process. This is a learning series that will allow you to identify, probably gaps that currently exist in your organization's payroll operations, and also in a way help you mitigate risks, right? So we have called this learning series as Global Payroll, Turning Adversities into Advantages. And as you know, this is a four-part series. Today, we start the first of the four-part series. We have Jason Davenport, chair of the and he will be talking on the topic globalizing payroll, a solution to prevent its disruption. On the 28th, that's tomorrow, Niamo would be co-hosting the webcast with the GPMI and will be joined by other payroll experts in the form of a panel that would be holding a discussion on the topic, navigating through the challenges of global payroll. On the 29th, that's Wednesday, we will be joined by a guest speaker, Mr. Kamaraju Mutiala from the payroll leadership team at Nokia. And he would be discussing on the topic, virtualizing global payroll to ensure service continuity. And for the finale on the 30th, which is on Thursday, we'll be joined by Ms. Felicia Cheek, a well-revered global payroll expert and the current director for HCM product strategy at Oracle. And she will be discussing on the topic, crisis and accelerator to drive your payroll transformation agenda. So as we move on to the webcast, a few quick tips for all attendees. The session will be muted for all participants, and hence, should you have any questions, feel free to shoot them out using the Q&A option provided to you in the Zoom panel. And just feel free to ask your questions at any point in time during the webcast. We would be taking stock of the questions and answers, and we will be answering them rather towards the end of the session. And at any point in time, should you drop off the webcast, just feel free to join back using the same meeting ID that you used to join the webcast in the first place. Yeah. And the Global Payroll Week is, you can see it, you can simply witness it on social media by using the hashtag Global Pay Week. So that would be the tag for you to follow if you just to follow activities by payroll professionals during this Global Payroll Week. And Niamo is posting out several interesting snippets on payroll tax regulations on its own social media platforms. So please do feel free to follow us and just learn something more. So moving on to today's webcast, a very, very warm welcome to you, Jason Davenport, Chair of the CIPP UK, who has kindly accepted our invite to join us for the first webcast on the topic, Globalizing Payroll, a solution to prevent its disruption. And joining him would be Vivek Khanna, Chief Client Partner at Niyamo, who will be moderating the discussion. Welcome, gentlemen, and Vivek, over to you.
Thank you, Stephanie. Never let a good crisis go waste, said Winston Churchill. Service delivery redundancy is an inherent part of globalizing payroll that involves leveraging global systems with distributed service delivery capability. An organization can either adopt to a standardized global payroll process or a localized approach handled through country-specific providers. A successful global payroll strategy involves devising the right mechanism to combat multiple points of failure for any given country in order to ensure continual service delivery. Please join me in welcoming Jason Davenport as the expert for today's webcast. Jason is the chairman of the board of directors for CIPP, the Chartered Institute of Payroll Professionals from United Kingdom, their leading authority. He has been a non-executive director with the CIPP since 2012. He is also the founder of payroll consultancy firm Calendar Consulting. Jason has spent majority of his career in the payroll and the HR BPO industry. In the last 25 years, he has worked for Logica CMG, now called CGI, NGA Human Resources, both in UK and globally, providing payroll, pensions, and HR outsourced services. Jason was the Chief Operating Officer for Capita HRS division in UK, delivering to various both public and private sector organizations before starting Calendar Consulting. A huge Liverpool fan, husband, father of 3, and a dog as well. Welcome, Jason.
Thank you very much, Vivek. It's I really appreciate that that introduction. Sometimes the dog think he has to go first, though, rather than the kids. I'd like to say thank you so much for inviting me to join you, and may I wish you all a happy Global Payroll Week. I think the webcast series that's been put together this week is really informative, and now more than ever, we must stay connected. Let's keep talking, look out for each other, and recognize the importance of what it is to be a community. So yeah, thank you for this invitation. If I could also present my own quote, Sumantra Ghoshal, the founding dean of the Indian School of Management in Hyderabad, he very famously stated that businesses are spinning tops. Let the momentum slacken and the top will fall. And that is so true today, with many businesses need to consider what's happening right now and ensure they keep spinning to whatever degree to maintain momentum and to be able to come through the challenges that we're facing at the moment.
Right, Jason, thank you. So as you all know, in this crisis, something special is happening. We are all keeping very well connected. Suddenly, Zoom has become the platform of choice, right? We're all Zooming at all points of time. So the question I have for you, Jason, have you had a chance to interact with your other peers in the industry? And how do you think companies are thinking about sustaining their operations, especially challenging times like these, for processes like payroll, which are so critical to their operations?
Absolutely, certainly, and I have indeed, from a Chartered Institute perspective, our fellow associations across the globe, Vivek, have had to review their own plans in terms of providing support to the industries they serve, to the membership that they're responsible for, and they've had to maintain and add, at this point in time, add to the policy and advice lines that they have available. I think the word that's being most used at the moment is unprecedented. And the level of calls that are coming into those advice lines globally is certainly increasing, with a legislation landscape that's changing almost daily. And so we have to operate now virtually, but be open for business and be available to membership, just as we've been able to do. For the businesses I work with locally and internationally, this has been an incredibly challenging time. And just thinking about that whole position about critical process, for those businesses that are not already established to support remote working, they've had to look to increase that kind of capability wherever possible. And they've seen a much increased load on demand connectivity, system capacity. As you say, we're all getting used to using Zoom now, but that's increasing so manyfold. It's incredible to be able to try and keep that remote working capability. Lots of organizations that I'm working with simply weren't ready to scale up to that type of demand that would be placed on systems for remote connections. And actually, a number of our board directors within the CIPP hold very senior positions within retail and logistics businesses. And they've been working tirelessly to ensure the infrastructure is available to make essential goods available to the general public continually, I just want to point out, actually, my own brother's a trauma surgeon, and he had COVID-19 himself. But I'm very pleased to say that he's back on he's through the worst of it, and he's now back working on the front line. But yeah, Vivek, the pandemic, I think it's impacted both our own institutes and many associations' calendars for the whole planned face-to-face meetings that we have throughout the year. I know that the APA are now moving to a virtual approach. I was due to board a plane on Friday to go to the APA conference. Unfortunately, that won't be happening. And also CPA, they're moving to a virtual approach as well for the main conference. I obviously wish them every success in the change shape of that event. The CIPP conference is not due to take place until October, so we still have plans in place to hold a fantastic event, but in the hope that the crisis has been averted and we're able to move around more freely. I guess on that one, only time will tell. And I certainly want to applaud all the healthcare professionals and the key workers, including payroll, and we'll speak of them more, for everything they're doing right now, because they are selflessly supporting all of us. Even though businesses who are still able to operate are facing challenges because it's who's available through their personnel. Some are having to self-isolate, some are looking after a family and what have you. So with so many of them having to consider that, they might be in vulnerable categories and therefore unable to work. Other businesses, as we've seen, certainly across the UK and across the globe more broadly, they might be furloughing staff and have very limited resources available, who are now facing much increased pressure to provide service or products to the client base. I guess furthermore, with the payroll and pensions teams, such rapid change in legislation is seeing massive pressures to ensure the calculations are correct for the workforce, including pensions, including other deductions. And I know from my own network that many colleagues are working night and day to support and ensure the pay is correct. The challenge we see now is that with a lot of those smaller departments and having individuals affected, you could easily then see that a whole department could be made unavailable. So it's a time when having broader resilience, having the ability to flex workforce resources to support other areas will really make a difference. Let's also not forget the forced position on many of remote working. For lots of us that have worked globally, we're used to this type of contact, but for many, this really is a challenge in itself. And I wholeheartedly urge both employers and employees to ensure communication is kept ongoing throughout the period. And for those who are isolated, you must take regular breaks and some form of exercise so that you're not fixed to the computer screen all day. It's important to think about yourself and keep yourself healthy throughout this period, yeah.
True, Jason, you're so right. And it's so good to hear that your brother is doing well, good, recovered, and we really appreciate all the service that he's providing to everybody, right? The healthcare workers are truly the frontline soldiers in this war.
Yes.
And you well speak, right? A lot of us who are in the globalized world are so used to working different hours, working remotely, using all these tools. But then when you look at the global payroll scenario, there are many countries, many locations that for them, this is a first-time scenario, right? And given this situation, what do you think is what would be a successful global payroll strategy? What do you think organization will need to have in place to avoid payroll service delivery disruption, given that something like this may happen again?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think this, if we think of business continuity planning and risk management, pandemics while should be in place and should be considered, very often isn't the type of thing that's thought of first and foremost, though from what we have going on now, it absolutely will be at the forefront of people's minds. I think a global payroll strategy typically comes from a desire to be able to review workforce costs, trends, management information, helping decision-making all to be made in one place, supporting compliance and reporting, and ensuring standards and best practice can be adopted across all parts of the business model, regardless of which country you operate in. But recognizing, having a global strategy wherever that's possible, also you need to have local support where you must. Having a complete view of data also highlights potential risks and ultimately supports more informed decision making. I think with every challenge faced, Vivek, there are opportunities for change. The time that we're in now is one of those where many organizations, they'll be aware, have considered digital transformation and strategies around digital transformation. However, many may not have found themselves only at the start of this, and will have to really consider how to accelerate plans dramatically. For me, to be able to consider a global strategy, a business needs to start with knowing what you have, where you have it, and ensuring it's accessible to those who need it. You mentioned the 3 children, and my eldest, who's at university, she's teaching me about technology all the time, and always on is a feature of today's society. If you can access all that you need remotely and quickly, you're well along the journey. For many businesses today, they'll have found that suddenly access to buildings and files has become increasingly important, because it shouldn't have been the case. But for information that can just as easily sit on servers and be available to those who need it virtually, suddenly they'll find themselves locked out from that. So I think many organizations will now find that they've been operating with single points of contact for many processes, and that in turn, when we think about the pandemic we're facing, that in turn translates into single points of failure. So having knowledge, having authority, and understanding spread across multiple positions across the business is key to successfully to create a successful strategy of building in resilience and ensuring the jigsaw puzzle of services is known to all. That is, I use the term jigsaw puzzle because each of us has a part to play in the overall picture, and the more that you understand the part that you play, the better that you can serve and understand the broader business and therefore see the big picture. So that kind of jigsaw puzzle analogy I use quite a bit, just in terms of knowing where you sit and knowing what the broader picture is. But, building in resilience and support knowledge management, it actually drives continuity, and it moves away from single points of failure. So the approach to review and management of resources at a global level also helps to highlight areas of risk and opportunities. The operating at as high a level as possible as you can within a business and in supporting businesses means that you can do that full horizon scanning.
Right.
Regardless of borders, if you can see what's going on and what's happening and do that horizon scanning, then to bring in a boating analogy, you'd want your captain to be at the helm of the ship for full view, not down in the machine room and unable to see ahead,
Sure. So, Jason, you raise a very important point. And, often I am asked by leaders, global payroll leaders who are trying to devise a strategy, a more resilient model, a more efficient model. And when you look in the current context, right, where you have nations under lockdown, and which would be more complex, running a localized delivery or a globalized delivery model?
That's a really good question, Vivek. I know many businesses will now wish they paid more attention to virtualizing their workforce, and those principles can be applied here. It's highly likely that a localized delivery model may well not have benefited from a digital review. A localized delivery model therefore may be overly reliant on personnel being present to make it operate successfully. It may be reliant on postal systems for delivery of hard copy data and electronic exchanges. The operational office may hold physical files for individuals with, hard copies of contracts, employment changes, terms and conditions, and the like. The data that was always accessible simply by turning up at the office and physically opening the file on a desk now is just inaccessible, when a pandemic may prevent personnel even getting into the office. So I think if you multiply that by the amount of temporary and permanent changes that might be made every processing period, and also the lack of control that might exist across all that paperwork moving around, you start to make a very compelling case both for digitalizing data exchanges and for globalizing your view of the process. And I use global there even at a local level, having that much broader view, whether it's very local, whether it's regional, and whether it truly is global, but being able to see virtually where you're at now is becoming more and more important. And I think technology should always be an enabler. It's always about adding value to a process and allowing data to be shared across borders, as appropriate, of course, and enabling routines that keep businesses moving and working. For those who are responsible for global delivery or having to deal with each country in turn, this can also be prone to error if it's down at that local level, have less consistency in forms and processing, and it may create much more difficulty in trying to share resources or support if each country is still acting independently. Whereas if you have a broader global model, you've got much more ability to flex resources and flex support.
Right. So now that we've thought through this process and most of the leaders are thinking through a transformation project. And as we all know, all transformation projects are complex, right? Complex to say the least, and everybody's afraid of all the points of failures that might happen. Technology, resources, risks, etc. What in your mind would be one area that you would ask leaders that are trying to make this decision to place special emphasis to?
I guess I couldn't answer with a single area, but I know that the single area that often is focused on is software. Often businesses focus on the software in the payroll transformation as being the start and the end, but actually it's only one of the pillars. For a well-designed and well-delivered transformation program, you've got to start with strategy. Got to answer key questions from the business leaders of how is this going to drive value from investments? How is this going to improve the overall position of the company? How is this change going to create an impact? So we have the strategy there. We have culture, should also form a part of the transformation. Answering questions such as, are we taking the business towards self-sufficiency? Is this to enable manager-employee self-service? Is this to take us as a business to allow the bring your own device, BYOD type facility, and accept that always on is the new approach? Taking strategy and culture of how you want to do things, you've got to think about behaviors. You move towards behaviors, and with any transformation project, there are behavioral changes needed. If you're going to create a one-stop approach or to remove multiple handling of data, this means everyone has to take ownership and accountability of their data. Moving on from behaviors, you've got processes. Yeah, processes must be reviewed as efficient and lean as possible. And typically I'd use the KISS principle. Yeah, keep it simple. That's always worked for me. It's always worked for me, but that works for me in my mind. We must have as few touch points as possible. And a business must consider upskilling to ensure that the technology that's chosen is understood. So it could be a refresh in technology or a completely new approach to learning. That should be considered because there's very different to before. Previously we've had classroom type training, whereas nowadays it's a lot more focused on bite-sized tutorials and how-to virtual guides. That kind of learning on the job is far more efficient, and certainly what I think the new generations entering the workforce is driving for change. And just touching on that, with so many different generations in the workforce now, the need for a combination of training approaches is important to allow choices to be made to individual learning needs. So each of those where I mentioned strategy, culture, behaviors, process, that all comes to support right first time delivery, and the software in itself then is only one part of that. Yeah. I guess with the issues that we're facing globally with the pandemic, organizations should be asking the question, not if this process works, but rather what else have we got to do to enable this to work. I've seen in many projects in my time that in asking the question and turning over those rocks, if you like, of process, you know, you may well find lots of areas that are happening to the side of the software or are happening to the side of the main process. And where that's undocumented or where it's not systemized or controlled, and we end up becoming completely reliant on those managing that process because they're the only ones that know the particular steps that have to be taken. So a key challenge in a transformation project is also to unlock those hidden processes and ensure they're captured when moving to a new approach. Otherwise, you'll end up with both the old and the new working alongside together. And it's important to ensure the business is not just providing lip service and the old approach continues. Too many businesses end up with both processes in place and actually double the cost.
Right.
It may well start as belt and braces because you go, okay, we've got an old system and we're moving to a new. But sometimes within change programs, if you don't fully articulate the benefits of the change and you don't hold a review cycle looking, you know, what did the change deliver, then both approaches may well remain in place with duplication of cost, effort, and obviously the increase in risk. I've seen lots of projects start with a particular aim in mind, either greater management information, reduction in multiple handling costs, or there could be lots of other objectives that are not then fully reviewed following implementation to see if those benefits have really been identified and fully realized. And if not, why not? You know, often that's where the greatest lessons are in terms of lessons learned. And you can see that sometimes the same energy at the end of a project isn't given to the attention as the project initiation phase is given. But that's obviously a vital part of continued development.
Right. Thank you, Jason. So switching gears a little bit, now that we are looking at more at business as usual, you know, crises like these, like a pandemic or any other crisis that, you know, puts the entire business operation into jeopardy, how can organization ensure that the payroll service delivery faces, well, as minimal an impact as possible? It's impossible to have no impact. I'm sure there's impact, but the minimal impact as possible.
I think, yeah, that's a great question, Vivek, and so timely in where we find ourselves right now. Yeah, I'm sure all those who manage risk, which is most of us on a day-to-day basis, are concerned about that. Absolutely. You know, how do we make sure that we deliver minimal to no impact? Well, I think building in resilience, it's often seen as an overhead, and it may not have been planned for with so many supply chains that are working in today's market on just-in-time delivery. Often there's very little contingency in many processes. Business continuity plans must encompass the three key pillars, of course. You've got people, process, and technology. And with a pandemic, it's obviously incredibly difficult to tell who is going to be affected, who is high risk, how that change, you know, as this pandemic is evolving, we're learning as well as to, you know, who are the affected communities, who are going to be worse affected. So having your processes documented, having resilience across your users so that contingency does exist for one person to be able to step into another's shoes means you must have taken time to really understand those processes and understand that the steps are fully understood. Often time has not been given to rehearsing and reviewing business continuity plans to the level that it needs to, but I guess a BCP is probably on many people's desks right now and being reviewed. Ensuring it's available, meaning accessible, not just in a file somewhere in an office that you can't get to, and kept regularly up to date, because with individuals changing, then making sure it's got the correct individuals and the contact details there. But, you know, operational excellence comes from understanding all those building blocks and having a fully mapped escalation process as well, so that the operational and guidance can be there to ensure those who are able to deliver have all the tools and data to hand to do so. Having a live risk document that's reviewed regularly and forms part of the business continuity plan is essential to be able to mobilize quickly, and that also will ensure minimal impact to overall delivery.
True, absolutely true. But given the current crisis, so organizations that were ahead in their plans, are undergoing transformation, found themselves on the positive side, handling delivery. And there are others who didn't have documented plans and now are struggling. Now, the question that comes to is, of course, you will take some steps to take care of business as usual. But then at the same time, as I said first, right? Never let a good crisis go to waste. Is this the right time for them to really rethink their strategy? Or should they just wait for everything to get over and put a pause and then go back? What's your opinion about that?
I think that's another great question, Vivek. Yeah, I think while many businesses are learning to cope and struggling to survive, those who have the opportunity to reflect and rethink their strategy should absolutely now consider why maybe they've not reviewed this before, and how they can benefit from a model that allows parties to support each other. That could even be on a local level or a regional level or global level, but being able to switch and move processing. Wow, going back to my NGA days, that's something I used to take advantage of an awful lot when I could send work out to India and the teams there when the UK teams were struggling with volumes or struggling with resources. And I used to see that happening, on a daily basis where we could move stuff and have it processed overnight. It was really, really helped us to maintain our resilience. Often, there may be resistance to change within the business and counter arguments to moving towards full deployed self-service and digital adoption. But with this crisis, and it now facing every corner of the globe, it must also suggest the importance of our fully thought through, resilient global payroll strategy. It can really be a key differentiator in ensuring business maintains its momentum.
True, absolutely. So does having a globalized payroll solution help in minimizing the possibility of a disruption in the payroll process?
I think the simple answer is yes. And whilst I know there's lots of detail to be considered here, at a headline level, a business that's adopted a globalized payroll solution is far more likely to have considered business continuity, because it's gone through the process of looking at what it has, where it has it. It's far more likely to have considered that, and adopted, globalized payroll solution is more likely to have considered all that, including risk management, and building in standard processes that follow best practice. This, having done that as well, it also means its workforce is far more aligned to working at that level. Many of the individual processes, for example, payment processes in each country, because they will have gone through a journey of globalization, right, then they'll have been tested, they'll have been reviewed to ensure that they can either be completed remotely, or there are options considered for alternative deployments. I think that's one of the strengths of having gone through a global strategy. You review all of those strands and make sure that you've got consideration of all of the different facets.
Right. Whenever you review any process that has been the stagnant or the same for a period of time, it always leads to a new out of the box thinking. You retest each of the questions that you may have not have asked before. I know these are challenging times, and the Global Payroll Week we are celebrating, first starting from this entire week is an acknowledgement to the commitment and the work put forth by our entire professional community. What's the message you would like to share with all the global payroll professionals?
Well, do you know what? I know that the approach to work, the conscientiousness and the diligence of all the payroll professionals out there is ensuring that whatever country and against whatever circumstances, they as a community will not let their businesses down. I've seen that throughout my whole career. This may mean getting up at 4 a.m. It may mean researching all the new legislation and considered changes to legislation, and interpreting those and managing that for the businesses they support. That may mean that they're working incredibly hard and incredibly late to ensure no one goes unpaid. And it may mean finding solace in fellow professionals, who only they know what they're going through because they've done it so themselves. I don't want to detract at all from the sterling work of the health professionals and for those in local authorities and those keeping each country running, whatever guise that may be. But the payroll professionals out there, they are identified as key workers because pay is mission critical to all of us. So I would like to say many thanks for the opportunity speaking with yourself today, Vivek, at the start of Global Payroll Week. Both I and all of my colleagues at CIPP wish all our friends and fellow professionals, both at home in the UK and across the globe, the very best during this time. As I started with, I was so looking forward to personally going to both the US and the Canadian conference planned for May and June to meet up with colleagues from across the globe and network and debate and learn as we do in those conferences. It's incredibly sad not to be meeting people physically. So whatever we can do virtually, like this, I applaud you for this, then we must do that to stay connected, and we must take advantage of technology to allow us to do that. Yeah?
True, and Jason, we look forward to the time, better times when it will all go back to the new normal, and we look forward to welcoming you back over here in the United States, and I look forward to seeing you in United Kingdom. Thank you so much for your time and sharing with us your thoughts, your expertise, and your experience. Stephanie, over to you.
Yes, thank you, Vivek, and thank you so much, Jason. I mean, there were so many knowledge nuggets out there, and I really hope our audience, you've been able to, who've actually joined us by the numbers, you've benefited immensely through this session. We're going to have a quick poll right now, just a single question that we're going to ask. The poll is going to pop up on your screen just about now. Okay, so there you go. The question we have for our audience: how mature is your organization in its attempt to globalize its payroll strategy? So if you are currently operating out of a single country, so you could pick the first option. So if you find this webinar will help you initiate payroll transformation for your organization, you could pick the second. If you think your organization has currently shelved or has delayed its global payroll transformation strategy, then the third. Of course, if you have currently initiated a payroll transformation strategy, you could opt the fourth. If you have already embarked on a successful payroll transformation strategy, you think that the steps that you've taken had helped you mitigate the risks that you might have faced in the last couple of weeks, please opt for the fifth. And if you think that the steps that could not probably get you quite there, right, that's when you'd opt for the sixth. So we'd like to quickly just analyze and see, the pulse of the audience that we have. We're going to give you a couple more seconds to pick your answer, and you would see the results in the form of a simple percentage chart, right? So we're just going to give you a few more seconds there. So right after the polls, we're going to go, we have received quite a couple of questions here. We would be going through these questions, and we'd have Vivek and Jason point out answers to those questions. So we're going to end the poll just about now. Okay. Wow, now that looks like quite a mix, Vivek, don't you think?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Quite a few people seem to be down their payroll transformation journey, which is great.
Yeah.
Good to see, yeah.
Exactly. So 36% have said that they have initiated their payroll transformation journey by opting for globalizing their payroll. And I think based on the snippets that Jason had just shared, certainly is the right way to go. For those who feel that you were probably unsuccessful, good time to go back to the drawing board, see what are the measures you could take, and then definitely fix them. Uh, Before we move on to the Q&A segment, a quick reminder to all those who are yet to register for the GPMI webcast that's happening tomorrow. So because this event is hosted by the GPMI requests you to log into their portal and do the registration. And so you simply have to search for Global Payroll Week GPMI. You would land on their page. Go ahead and register and join the GPMI for the next session. If you've opted to be a part of webcasts 3 and 4, you should have received a calendar invite from Irene Jones with a link to participate in the subsequent webcasts. And if you need any further assistance, just drop in a line to irene.jones@niamo.com and we'll be happy to help you. So moving on to the questions that we received real quick. Okay, so Vivek, the first question I have here, since payroll cannot have a stoppage, how can an aggregator model, or I think a unified model, that's what the person was trying to say, unified payroll model for global payroll, who consolidate payroll processing at one single central location, can ensure that there is no disruption in situations of pandemic like the COVID-19? Seems to be a pretty specific question.
Sure. So ultimately, I refer back to what Jason said. A globalized payroll model leads to redundancy because instead of one point of failure, that your payroll is processed only by a localized team. Once you move into a unified, harmonized payroll model, you can have backup teams operate the same payroll processes. The processes work far more using technology, using rules that are defined in the technology, enabling you to complete the payroll, even if maybe a team is kind of locked out. Also, because you're now moving from on-premise based systems to more cloud operated systems, which enable you to build in that resilience and redundancy so that in situations like what we have today, a global payroll solution can deliver a far better strategy. The aggregator model has partial impact over here because yes, you can have different teams accumulate in data, but if finally the data goes to a localized model, then you still have the same weakness. But the more harmonized and a global application you use, the better it is for the company. Jason?
Yeah, I think I have to agree with you, Vivek. Yeah, I was as you were talking through there, I was just looking at some of the other Q&A. There's quite a bit coming through.
Correct.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you, Vivek. Thank you, Jason. I hope that answers your question. The second one I have here, in the unknown current situation, do you see CXOs even attempting to change the way global payroll is done or bring in an expert outsourcing provider? Or do you see more of a let's not change what is broken kind of an approach?
Jason, I think this is best answered by you.
No problem at all, Vivek. Yeah, I think I think businesses, whatever they can do right now in terms of planning, in terms of preparation, it's well worth taking that time to just to consider how they should operate. And whilst often there's an approach of let's not change it, it's not broken. Actually, is it as good as it can be? Whatever you can do now in terms of planning and ensuring that you've got a centralized dashboard, of each country's compliance needs. You're completely aware of banking arrangements, completely aware of working rule arrangements, etc. These are all really important factors that you should be considering now because, with the resource impacts that we're seeing through COVID-19, there could well be other areas that you've not considered and spotted. So take as much time as you can to use any downtime. I don't know if people are experiencing any downtime at the moment, but if there is any available to them, then do as much as you can there in terms of planning and preparation and making sure that, risk, as I mentioned earlier, business continuity plans, risk plans are all at the forefront of our minds now in terms of managing business. So take this opportunity to review that all of those areas are covered. And I guess to the very start of the question about let's not change if it's not broken, who knows where this might end. So yeah, I think it's take the time out to do as much planning as is possible. Yeah.
Right. And also I would like to add to that while you have the time, one of the big questions all these CXOs are going to be asked once things come to normal is that they will have even more greater pressure to make their processes more efficient. And while it may not be broken, it may not be the most efficient way and may not be the most cost competitive way. And I think an evaluation, whether it could be done in a better and a more cost effective way, might be something that every board is going to ask every function. And the quicker you will do for your own function, you will be in a better position to respond than being forced into a scenario that you wouldn't like.
Got it. Thank you, Vivek. So the next question that I have for you both, what kind of changes are you observing as a result of this pandemic and impending global recession? How is it likely to change further, and how do we track that?
I think it's a really good question. And actually, we could go into something much broader because I guess the world is reducing its dependencies on fossil fuels. We've seen that as an immediate reduction happening due to the lockdown enforcement. So it's likely that there'll be a lot of challenge to conventional thinking when it comes to returning to work. Do we need so much office space? Must we have so many face-to-face meetings as examples of those? Technology's been used to enable business to keep talking. And I think that will be promoted more and more. In our own House of Commons, we're using Zoom as we're using here today for the politicians to keep talking and practice social distancing. I have to say that I think there will be a bounce back. I think there's talk of recession, but or there's consequential impact of what we're seeing. I think it'll be a really cautious bounce though. For a number of people, it's going to change the way that they work, dramatically. And I think we will see. I think Vivek mentioned the new norm at the start of the webinar today, and I think the new norm for an awful lot of people will be remote working. I think I read somewhere, Vivek, today that TCS had announced that coming out of the pandemic, they're likely to have a lot more people remote working than they did before, and I think many businesses will be in that kind of situation. Do you agree? Absolutely.
I think fundamentally, companies and organizations are going to question all of their pre-existing assumptions. Pre-existing assumptions around security, around talent, around real estate, around processes. I think the future is going to come sooner than what we expected. This pandemic has actually, so for example, you think about a company like Zoom that had less than 20 million users, suddenly has 200 million users, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And everybody's becoming so much more comfortable that every part of the business cycle is going to change dramatically. Companies are going to rethink supply chain. Single points of failure in supply chain, as has been identified in this pandemic, is going to be the other big area. So we are going to see a distribution of the supply chain take place, which is going to get its own set of winners and losers across. But as always, I think the most important part is companies that are going to be agile and looking to change are the ones that are going to end up being winners, as they have been throughout our history.
Got it. Thank you, Vivek. Thank you, Jason. Okay, so I have a question here that is on data security. Someone who asks me, during this pandemic situation where all employees are working from home, it doubles the risk of data security. Where the customer data is easily available, what would be a suitable measure to reduce this risk? It seems to be slightly more general. Then I think it would still apply for wanted Vivek.
So from my perspective, I think all of the companies that are already using server-based or cloud-based systems already have efficient logging mechanisms. What it would result in is that while they had logging mechanisms, they would now have more active artificial intelligence-based monitoring mechanisms so that people who are accessing data, they would know whether the data is being used for a customer-specific process or is the data being pulled out. As you know, most systems, once logged into the servers, every activity is being tracked. While right now it is being tracked on a passive basis, more for either improving software or making things better. Companies like Splunk and other logging mechanisms are out there that log these. Most of these companies now are coming up with artificial intelligence-based monitoring systems. And just the way, all of us have seen, when suddenly your credit card is used in another country where you're not there and you suddenly get a call. A very similar systems would be starting to be used on home-based monitoring systems, that as soon as an employee starts to use a data which is not for a specified purpose, the systems will either lock down or somebody would make a call. So I do see that kind of security systems becoming more and more prevalent. And the need of those softwares will become even more important, given that a lot more people will be working remotely. Yes, sir?
I suppose everything that you've said there, Vivek, yeah, I think it's as much as those systems, the tools are in place today, maybe we'll see an increase in the monitoring of those, the maintenance around those to make sure that it is working the way it's expected to work. I guess a shout out for all businesses for their employees is more just of the everybody's at risk at the moment of being scammed. There's lots of scammers out there now. So this is away from kind of our day-to-day business, but just warnings that unfortunately there's still individuals that want to try and make something of this for themselves, and they are certainly on the increase. We see that an awful lot more in the UK at the moment. And so for everybody to be vigilant, and for all those employees that are at home to be vigilant as well, and not to be caught unawares because of the pressure of the outside situation at the moment. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jason. And Vivek, I have just time for one more question, and this seems to be like an interesting case study in itself, Vivek. So here's the question. My company has faced problems due to dependency on our payroll partner who was unable to cover payroll services. I suppose it's because of the COVID-19 situation. So we manage payroll partly in-house and depend on two partners to cover our global requirement. How can we ensure such disruptions do not happen again?
Well, I guess you have to take a step back and relook at your entire payroll strategy, right? You have to think through the partners that you're choosing. Do they themselves have the right processes? Do they have the infrastructure to back up their own services? Does your partner themselves have redundancies, or they are too small that if they were to be put into a crisis mode, you are their backup scenario? And if you are their backup scenario, do you have the knowledge or access to actually deliver those services? So it is very difficult at this point of time for me to give, specific, but I would definitely encourage you to relook at every aspect and think about both the BCP and maybe relook at your entire payroll process if that's what has affected you. Jason, would you like to add anything?
Yeah, I think just to add into that, as you say, the particular question was quite specific, but take time now to review capacity. I think a lot of recent business models have been driving efficiency wherever possible. So it's, making it as lean as possible,
True.
making it as single step as possible. But the pandemic has raised the issue of capacity and ensuring that you've got that fail-safe plan. So, both efficient, everybody wants efficient models, but you also need capacity within the system just to support that because of resilience. And building knowledge at a global level will support your business continuity planning, and it'll create that resilience within your overall support model. Because that way it's allowing key information not just being held at a local level, but also known at a global level as well. I think that's all I'd add to it. That today's considerations for the future is both about efficiency, but also consider capacity, and that's to create resilience.
Okay, that pretty much summarizes it. Thank you so much, Jason, and thank you, Vivek. We do have a couple more questions that have come in, and what we're going to do, because we've just got 5 more minutes, we're going to take stock of these questions, and we'll make sure that those of you who ask these questions, we send out individual responses to you. All right. We're sorry we're not able to cover all of them in this particular webcast, but then we'll definitely make sure you get the responses. So thank you so much, Vivek, and thank you, Jason. I'm sure our audience benefited immensely from this webcast. Thank you so much, gentlemen.
Thank you, Jason.
Happy Global Payroll Week. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So with that, we come to the end of our first webcast. I hope you found the information that was shared enough to take some good pointers. We hope to see you again for the other webcasts later this week. And we relish your participation and contribution to the world of global payroll. So happy Global Payroll Week, everyone. And I hope you have a great day and a lovely evening. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Stephanie.
Thank you.